Hello, my beautiful Pisces. I'm truly grateful that you're here with me today. Before we begin, take a slow, gentle breath and allow yourself to settle into this moment. If these readings have been bringing you comfort or helping you see your journey from a different perspective, I'd love to invite you to subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing this space together. And if something in today's reading speaks to your heart, feel free to leave a comment below. I always enjoy hearing how these messages find their way into your life, because every story adds another light to this beautiful community we've created. As I began shuffling the cards for you, Pisces, something felt different. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it felt quiet, almost like standing beside the ocean just before sunrise, when the tide begins to shift long before anyone notices. July doesn't feel like another page on the calendar. It feels more like the opening chapter of a story that has been patiently waiting for the right moment to begin. There is a gentle invitation surrounding you, asking you to stop searching everywhere else for answers and to return to the one place that has always known the truth, your own heart. The very first card to reveal itself is the High Priestess. I actually smiled when she appeared because she doesn't rush. She never needs to. She simply waits until you're quiet enough to hear what she's been whispering all along. It feels as though you've spent so much time trying to understand everyone else's feelings, everyone else's expectations, that your own inner voice may have become softer than it deserves to be. Yet this month, that voice seems ready to rise again. You may notice yourself pausing more often before making decisions. Little moments of silence could suddenly feel meaningful instead of uncomfortable. There may even be a conversation you've been replaying inside your mind, wondering whether the time is finally right to speak. The cards aren't pushing you to force anything. They simply suggest that honesty may create space where uncertainty has been living for far too long. As I continue laying the cards on the table, the star quietly shines beside the High Priestess. Yeah, these two together create such a peaceful energy. It almost feels like hope returning after a long season of emotional exhaustion. Perhaps you've been carrying something that nobody else fully understands. Maybe you've smiled through situations that secretly weighed heavily on your heart. The beautiful thing is, this energy doesn't seem interested in reopening old wounds. Instead, it gently encourages healing without demanding perfection. I also keep feeling that many of you have been sensing little signs lately. Maybe certain songs appear at exactly the right moment. Maybe you keep thinking about someone unexpectedly. Maybe you look at the clock and notice repeating numbers without even trying. One number keeps floating into this reading again and again, 611. If that number crosses your path during July, perhaps let it become a gentle reminder to trust yourself before asking everyone else what they think. Sometimes your intuition has already made the decision long before your mind catches up. Oh my God, here comes Ace of Cups, and the atmosphere around the reading immediately softens. This doesn't necessarily feel like something arriving from outside of you. In many ways, it feels like something opening within you. It's almost as though your heart has been standing behind a locked door, patiently waiting for permission to breathe again. That permission may come through forgiveness, it may come through acceptance, or perhaps it comes from realizing you no longer need to carry emotions that were never yours to begin with. Someone may choose to speak honestly with you this month, or perhaps you're the one who finally finds the courage to express feelings that have remained hidden beneath the surface. Either way, the energy doesn't feel chaotic. It feels sincere. Even if the words are simple, they may carry far more weight than either person expected. Pisces, I also noticed something interesting here. You don't seem interested in chasing people anymore. There is a quiet confidence beginning to replace old patterns of overthinking. Instead of asking why something happened, you may begin asking whether it still belongs in your future. That's a very different question, and it creates a very different life. The final card appearing in this first part is the gentle Page of Cups. Every time this card shows up, I feel like someone is learning how to trust hope again. Not blind optimism, not pretending everything is perfect. Just allowing yourself to believe that life may still have beautiful surprises waiting around the corner. There is something wonderfully innocent about this energy, almost like rediscovering a forgotten part of yourself that still believes kindness matters, that love can grow slowly, and that healing doesn't always have to be painful. It also feels as though your creativity may begin speaking louder than usual. Maybe you suddenly feel drawn toward writing, painting, music, photography, or simply spending quiet moments near water. Those gentle nudges shouldn't be ignored. They may become the language your soul chooses before words are ready. The cards remain spread across the table, and I can't help but notice that every one of them seems to be pointing toward the same quiet truth. July isn't asking you to become someone new. It seems to be inviting you back to the person you've always been underneath all the noise. And as I continue turning over the next cards waiting just beyond these, I have a feeling they're about to reveal how this quiet beginning slowly transforms into something much bigger than it first appears. A gentle breeze seems to move through this reading as I place the next card on the table, and almost immediately, the Eight of Wands catches my attention. It's interesting because the energy doesn't feel rushed, even though movement is clearly building. It feels more like standing at the shoreline and noticing that every wave is coming in a little closer than the last. Something in your world may begin responding to the quiet choices you've already made, Pisces. The pace shifts without demanding that you force anything, and that's a beautiful place to be. You may find yourself receiving unexpected messages, invitations, or opportunities that weren't visible only a short time ago. They don't necessarily arrive with fireworks or dramatic announcements. Sometimes they appear through a casual conversation, a chance encounter, or even an idea that suddenly refuses to leave your mind. Yeah, those moments deserve your attention. They may look ordinary on the surface, but they carry the feeling of doors quietly unlocking. I keep noticing that your energy feels lighter than it has in quite some time. It's almost as if you've been carrying a backpack filled with stones, and somewhere along the journey you slowly set it down without even realizing it. That lighter feeling creates space for something entirely different. Instead of asking whether you're ready enough, your heart begins wondering what might happen if you simply allowed yourself to explore. As another card slides into place, the Three of Wands appears with such calm confidence that I can't help but smile. This card feels less concerned with where you've been and much more interested in where your eyes are beginning to look. There seems to be a horizon calling your attention, not because someone else is pointing toward it, but because something inside you recognizes it. Perhaps you've been thinking about making a change that once felt unrealistic, a different career path, a creative project you've quietly dreamed about, a relationship that asks you to show up as your authentic self instead of the version you thought everyone wanted. Whatever this may be, it doesn't seem interested in perfection. It simply asks for curiosity. Curiosity can sometimes be far more powerful than certainty. There may also be moments when fear quietly joins the conversation. That's perfectly human. Whenever life begins expanding, uncertainty often walks beside it. But what I find fascinating here is that fear doesn't appear to be leading the story anymore. It may still whisper, but it no longer seems to have the final word. The next card almost dances onto the table. The Fool always carries an energy that makes me pause for a second. Not because it's reckless, but because it reminds us that every meaningful journey once looked unfamiliar. I almost feel someone smiling while standing at the edge of a path they never imagined they would choose. Maybe you've been waiting until every answer appeared before taking a single step. Maybe you've believed you needed complete clarity before trusting yourself. The cards seem to offer a gentler perspective. Sometimes the path reveals itself because you begin walking, not before. Oh my God! I keep getting the feeling that someone watching this reading has been talking themselves out of something beautiful. Every time excitement begins to rise, doubt quickly follows behind. Yet your intuition feels surprisingly steady beneath all of that mental noise. It doesn't shout, it simply continues pointing in the same direction over and over again, patiently waiting for you to notice. Life may also introduce people who mirror a version of yourself you've been slowly becoming. Conversations begin flowing differently. New connections may feel surprisingly comfortable. Even familiar places could carry a completely different atmosphere because you're seeing them through different eyes. The final card resting beside the others is Wheel of Fortune, and its presence changes the rhythm of the reading in the most interesting way. Rather than suggesting everything suddenly flips overnight, it feels like seasons naturally changing. You don't force spring to arrive. You simply notice one morning that the air feels different. That's the feeling surrounding this part of your journey. You may begin recognizing that certain delays weren't necessarily preventing you from moving forward. Perhaps they were quietly preparing you for opportunities that required a different version of you. Looking back, pieces that once seemed disconnected might begin fitting together in ways you couldn't have predicted. There's also something about timing here that feels surprisingly comforting. You don't have to chase every possibility. You don't have to compare your pace with anyone else's. Some opportunities naturally draw closer as you continue becoming more aligned with what genuinely matters to you. I also sense that your confidence grows in subtle ways. Instead of announcing itself loudly, it appears through smaller moments. Saying yes when you would have once said no. Trusting your instincts without asking for 10 different opinions. Allowing yourself to imagine a future that feels exciting instead of intimidating. As these 4 cards remain together, they almost create the image of a bridge stretching toward unfamiliar ground. You don't need to see everything waiting on the other side to appreciate that the bridge exists. Sometimes the most meaningful transformation begins with one quiet decision to keep moving, even while the destination is still unfolding beyond the horizon. Strength settles onto the table with such quiet confidence that the entire atmosphere of this reading seems to soften. It's fascinating because this energy doesn't feel loud or forceful. It feels like someone who has finally realized they no longer have to prove their worth to anyone. Pisces, there may be moments during this season when your greatest victory isn't found in having the perfect response. It may simply come from choosing peace instead of reacting to every emotion that passes through your heart. I keep sensing situations where you once would have answered immediately. Perhaps someone says something that would normally pull you into overthinking. Maybe an old memory suddenly returns without warning. Yet something inside you feels different. Instead of chasing every feeling, you begin observing it. You let it exist without allowing it to decide what happens next. Yeah, that takes a different kind of courage, doesn't it? The beautiful thing is that your silence doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels intentional. There is a remarkable difference between holding back because you're afraid and remaining quiet because you've learned that not every moment requires an explanation. The cards seem to suggest you're beginning to recognize that difference. Temperance appears beside strength almost effortlessly, and together they create an energy that feels incredibly calming. It's almost like watching 2 rivers slowly meet, each carrying their own stories until they become something entirely new. Healing may not arrive through one dramatic breakthrough. Instead, it seems to unfold through countless small choices that gently reshape the way you experience your everyday life. Perhaps you've been trying to fix everything all at once. Maybe you've placed enormous pressure on yourself to figure out every answer before allowing yourself to feel hopeful again. This reading seems to whisper something much gentler. What if peace doesn't require having every piece perfectly arranged? What if peace begins the moment you stop fighting yourself? Someone may approach you carrying emotions they've struggled to express. Their words might not come out perfectly. They may hesitate. They may even stumble while trying to explain themselves. What's interesting is that this reading doesn't seem focused on perfect conversations. It feels focused on honest ones. Sometimes people don't need extraordinary words. They simply need someone willing to listen without preparing a defense. As I continue turning the cards, Queen of Cups arrives with an energy that feels unmistakably familiar for Pisces. She sits there with such grace that I almost forget the rest of the room exists. Oh my God! Her presence carries so much emotional wisdom without needing to announce it. This card reminds me of someone who has cried enough tears to recognize that softness isn't weakness. It's actually one of the strongest qualities a person can carry. Pisces, you've always had a remarkable ability to feel deeply. Perhaps there were times when that sensitivity felt like a burden, because not everyone understood it. Yet the energy surrounding you seems to be changing. Rather than protecting your heart by building walls, you may begin protecting it through healthy boundaries. Those are two completely different things. Healthy boundaries don't close your heart. They simply teach it where to rest. There also seems to be an invitation to speak from a place that feels genuine rather than emotional urgency. Imagine taking one slow breath before responding. Imagine allowing your heart to settle before choosing your words. That single pause may transform conversations in ways you never expected. I can't help but feel that someone watching this reading has been carrying guilt that doesn't truly belong to them. Maybe you've accepted responsibility for another person's choices. Maybe you've apologized simply to keep the peace. Perhaps you've convinced yourself that if you had only done one thing differently, everything would have worked out another way. The cards don't seem interested in blaming anyone. They simply encourage compassion. Compassion for others, certainly, but especially compassion for yourself. Justice quietly reveals itself as the final card in this part of the reading, and the atmosphere changes once again. Not because something dramatic is about to happen, but because balance begins finding its own way back into your life. There is something deeply comforting about realizing you don't have to force every outcome. Certain situations naturally settle once everyone involved has had enough time to see things more clearly. You may even notice yourself making what appears to be a very small decision. Maybe you decline an invitation that doesn't feel right anymore. Maybe you finally send a message you've rewritten a dozen times. Perhaps you decide to stop waiting for someone else's permission before pursuing something meaningful to you. Those moments rarely look life-changing while they're happening. Yet later, when you look back, they often become the exact point where everything quietly began shifting. Yeah, that's what keeps catching my attention here. The future doesn't always arrive through one enormous event. Sometimes it gently changes direction because one peaceful choice opens a path that fear could never have discovered. As I look toward the remaining cards still waiting beside the deck, it feels as though they're preparing to reveal what begins growing once those quiet decisions have had time to take root in your life. Nine of Cups is resting right in the center of the spread, and the feeling surrounding this card is almost impossible to ignore. It doesn't feel like excitement that's trying to impress anyone. It feels quieter than that. It reminds me of someone sitting by a window after a long journey, finally realizing they can breathe without carrying yesterday on their shoulders. Pisces, there seems to be a growing sense of emotional fulfillment finding its way toward you, not because everything around you suddenly becomes perfect, but because something inside you has learned how to recognize peace when it arrives. I keep getting the impression that you've been planting invisible seeds for much longer than you realized. Kindness that nobody thanked you for, patience that no one noticed, decisions that felt difficult in the moment, but slowly began shaping a completely different future. Sometimes we forget that life remembers every small act of courage, even when the results aren't immediately visible. This reading carries the feeling that some of those quiet efforts are finally beginning to bloom. Yeah, it's almost like watching the first flowers appear after wondering for weeks whether anything had been growing beneath the surface at all. There may also be encouraging movements surrounding your work, your finances, or a project that has been quietly waiting for the right season. It doesn't necessarily arrive in the exact form you've imagined, but it seems to carry a feeling of stability that allows you to exhale a little more deeply. Perhaps someone notices your talents. Perhaps an opportunity finds you through an unexpected conversation. Maybe you simply begin seeing possibilities where you once saw limitations. The beautiful thing is that your confidence feels different now. It isn't built on proving yourself, it's built on knowing yourself. The sun appears beside Nine of Cups, and everything in the reading becomes noticeably brighter. Oh my God, whenever this card arrives, I always feel as though someone has opened the curtains after a long stretch of cloudy mornings. There is warmth here that doesn't ask for permission. It naturally fills the room. You may discover yourself laughing more often without realizing why. Simple moments begin carrying unexpected joy. A walk outside, a favorite song playing at just the right time, sharing coffee with someone who makes you feel understood. Those experiences may seem ordinary to other people, but they become gentle reminders that happiness doesn't always announce itself with dramatic events. Sometimes it quietly settles into everyday life until one morning you notice how much lighter your heart has become. I also sense that your intuition becomes remarkably clear during this period. Pisces, you've always had an extraordinary ability to sense what isn't being spoken. Yet there were moments when you questioned yourself because logic seemed louder than instinct. That balance appears to be shifting. Instead of doubting your first impression, you may begin trusting it with greater ease. It's interesting because your intuition doesn't seem interested in predicting every outcome. It simply helps you recognize where your energy naturally belongs. King of Cups arrives with an incredibly grounded presence. He doesn't rush to solve every problem. He doesn't react to every passing emotion. He simply remains steady, and somehow that steadiness becomes reassuring to everyone around him. I wonder if people begin noticing this quality within you during July. They may find themselves coming to you for advice, for comfort, or simply because your presence feels safe. What's fascinating is that you don't seem to be trying to become anyone else. You're simply allowing yourself to become more fully who you've always been, underneath old fears and expectations. Emotional maturity often looks very quiet from the outside. It appears in the way you listen, the way you pause before speaking, the way you no longer feel responsible for carrying everyone else's emotional weight. There could also be meaningful growth in an important relationship. This doesn't necessarily mean every misunderstanding disappears overnight. Instead, it feels like two people slowly learning how to meet each other from a more honest place. Small gestures may begin saying more than long conversations ever could. The final card gently settles into place, revealing Six of Wands. What strikes me isn't applause or recognition. It's the feeling of quietly realizing you've made it farther than you once believed possible. Sometimes success isn't measured by reaching a finish line. Sometimes it's measured by becoming someone your younger self would have admired. You may receive appreciation from people who have been watching your journey from a distance. Others might notice changes in you before you fully recognize them yourself. There is a calm confidence surrounding this card that feels incredibly authentic. It doesn't need validation to exist, yet validation may naturally arrive anyway. I also sense that this season encourages you to keep expanding instead of settling. Every experience you've lived through seems to have prepared you for opportunities that require a more open heart rather than a more guarded one. New possibilities may continue appearing, not because you're chasing them, but because you've become someone who is ready to welcome them. As I glance toward the final cards still waiting beside the deck, I can't help feeling that they carry one last message about trusting the journey you've been creating, one gentle step at a time. Judgment is the first card waiting for us here, and the feeling it brings is incredibly gentle. It doesn't arrive with pressure or urgency. It feels more like standing in front of a familiar mirror and suddenly recognizing someone you've been slowly becoming all along. Pisces, there may be moments before this month comes to a close when you realize the biggest transformation wasn't happening around you. It was happening quietly within you, one choice, one conversation, one peaceful breath at a time. I keep sensing that you've been giving yourself far more grace than you used to, even if you haven't fully noticed it yet. Situations that once consumed your thoughts may no longer carry the same weight. People whose opinions once shaped your decisions seem to lose some of their influence. Yeah, that's a remarkable kind of freedom. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you've started caring about your own inner peace just as much. There also seems to be an invitation to release old versions of yourself without sadness. Sometimes we outgrow habits. Sometimes we outgrow fears. Sometimes we even outgrow dreams that once felt incredibly important. That doesn't mean they were mistakes. They simply belong to a different chapter of your life. Judgment carries the feeling that every experience has quietly prepared you for where your heart is ready to go next. As another card turns over, the world appears with such calm beauty that I almost hesitate before speaking. Oh my God! There is something deeply comforting about this energy. It doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like completion, like finishing a long journey and realizing you've collected wisdom in places where you thought you were only collecting pain. You may begin looking back at certain moments with softer eyes. Events that once felt confusing could start making more sense. Encounters that seemed random may reveal their purpose only after enough time has passed. Life has an interesting way of connecting dots that never appeared related while we were living through them. I also feel that your perspective becomes wider. You're no longer standing inside every emotion. Instead, you're able to observe your own story with compassion. That shift changes everything because it allows gratitude to quietly replace regret. Something else keeps catching my attention. Spirit animal energy feels very present around this reading. Whether it's a bird crossing your path, a butterfly appearing unexpectedly, a deer, a dolphin, or another animal that has always felt meaningful to you, perhaps don't dismiss those little encounters too quickly. They may simply remind you that nature often reflects the quiet conversations happening inside our souls. Every living thing follows its own timing, and perhaps you're being reminded that your journey deserves that same patience. Nine of Pentacles settles onto the table with an energy that feels wonderfully grounded. There is peace here that isn't dependent on someone else's approval. It's the quiet satisfaction of knowing you've built something meaningful inside yourself. Maybe your career begins feeling more stable. Maybe your finances slowly improve. Maybe your relationships become healthier because you've learned to value your own emotional well-being. I actually think this card is talking about something even deeper than external success. It's about waking up one morning and realizing you enjoy your own company. It's about trusting your own decisions a little more. It's about recognizing that the life you're creating doesn't need to look like anyone else's in order to be beautiful. I can't help but smile because your energy feels incredibly authentic here. You're no longer trying to rush through your own story. You're allowing it to unfold naturally, and somehow that patience creates even more opportunities to appreciate what's already surrounding you. Another gentle message continues appearing throughout this reading, and it comes through the angel number 1234. If this number happens to find you during the coming days or weeks, perhaps receive it as a quiet reminder that meaningful progress rarely happens all at once. One step leads to another. One decision opens the next door. One moment of courage becomes the foundation for another. There is something comforting about knowing that growth doesn't require giant leaps every single day. Consistency often creates miracles that speed alone never could. The final card waiting for us is the Moon, and somehow it feels like the perfect companion to everything we've explored together. Pisces, this card carries your natural rhythm so beautifully. It reminds me that not every answer needs bright sunlight before it can be trusted. Some truths reveal themselves under softer light. Your intuition may continue speaking through dreams, quiet feelings, unexpected memories, or gentle moments of stillness. There will probably be days when the path ahead isn't completely visible, and that's perfectly okay. You don't have to see the entire journey to trust the next peaceful step your heart is inviting you to take. As I slowly gather these cards back into the deck, I can't shake the feeling that July has been less about changing who you are and more about uncovering who you've quietly been becoming all along. There seems to be a calm sense of hope surrounding the road ahead, one that doesn't demand certainty before allowing joy to exist. Something beautiful may still be unfolding beyond what today's reading has revealed, and your heart already seems to know exactly where it wants to listen next.